Writing introductions can be very difficult for some people, introductions and conclusions. And oftentimes, um, we don't write them until much later in the process. I think it's really true what the text says here, that sometimes you're not really in a position to write your introduction until you've seen what you've already written and read it over a couple of times, and then something occurs to you. Sometimes the introduction comes to you rather than you coming to the introduction. A good introduction, once again, pays close attention to who your audience is, and it prepares your audience, your reader, for what you're going to write. What they say here is really well said. An introduction makes the connection between the more familiar world inhabited by the reader and the less familiar one of the writer's topic. So what you're doing is you're bringing your audience in from a place of lack of knowledge into one of expertise. So your introduction, that's its function, is to bring your reader in, to grab them by the hand and to slowly walk them into your topic and then into your thesis, what your comment about the topic. So the rest of this section on introductions in the textbook is to talk about the most common strategies. The first of which is to open your paper with a quotation. So how do you use a quotation? You have to be careful what you choose, but they suggest, and read this example here. This is a good example here. But what they suggest is that, you can agree with it, with the quotation. You can agree and expand upon it. You can disagree with it, or you can use it as a historical context or establish the tone in the rest of your paper. Sometimes you need to give your reader some historical background, or if they don't have it, then they are not prepared to read what follows. I'm thinking a historical review is kind of self-explanatory. But there's a subtopic inside the historical review, which they call review of a controversy, which is still a historical review, but it provides the background on a controversy or a debate. And sometimes it's good to show both sides of the debate for your readers so they know it sets up the context for what you're going to say. In this example of historical context, you've got the authors show you how you can combine quotes and a historical review that provides a context of the controversy, in this case over civil disobedience, and it kind of kills two birds with one stone. It gives people the historical context or gives your reader the historical context for the argument that will follow, whether you have a case against civil disobedience or a case for it. The next category that you could use for an introduction, they call from general to specific. Some people think of it as a funnel. And where the top of the funnel is the very general information that your reader knows, and it takes you down more specific interests, more specific reasons. And the specific ones are, of course, the thesis of your paper. In this one, this starts out talking about selfishness in general and as a human trait. And then that's very broad. And then it narrows down to the idea of selfishness as regards our travel and our choice of travel with an automobile. So, general down to specific. Okay, and that's your thesis. Is at the end is where you have your thesis. This is very common. You've probably used it once or twice yourself, but it is another way to do an introduction. A variation on this movement from general to specific is one where you move from the specific to the general. So it's like this. You start out here and you get bigger. Okay? And typically, you do this by telling a story at the beginning and then generalizing about the story here. In this case, talking about the Exxon Valdez, and then moving into a more specific example here, more general example about pollution in general. Let me say that again, or let the text say it again, because I didn't say it very well. Okay. In this one, it goes from the specific, which is the big story about the Exxon Valdez tanker, to the more general, the costs of sleep debt and not getting enough sleep. And that's what happened. The captain of that ship just didn't get enough sleep, and he crashed his tanker. It caused incredible amounts of damage. And the last, but sometimes the simplest category of introduction is the question introduction, where you get the reader's attention just by posing a question or a series of questions. In this case, you notice which of the following people would you say is most admirable? Which do you think is the least admirable? Okay. Yeah. Mother Teresa is a very controversial character, person, saint. And I think what you have here is a really good way to get the reader's attention by posing a question. You'll also notice how the question determines how Steven Pinker creates his introduction. So the first person he talks about is Bill Gates, the second person he talks about is Norman Borlaug, and the third person he talks about is Mother Teresa. So the reader has got the question, has come up with their own answers, and then begins to get information about all three from Pinker. It's a really pretty good way to do an introduction.